Welcome to another deep dive. You guys ready to go way back in time with me?
Always.
All right, then, let's do it. Ancient Greece, here we come. Today, we're diving into the world of Pythagoras.
Oh, this will be interesting. I'm sure everyone listening already knows the famous theorem,
Right. Everyone learns that one in school.
but there's so much more to this guy, right?
Exactly. We've got a ton of sources here, all about Pythagoras, and we're going beyond the basic math. We're talking about his life,
His philosophy.
his impact on, well, everything. Things might even get a little, how do I put this? Mystical. Buckle up.
I think it's safe to say Pythagoras was more than just a math guy. This guy was a philosopher, a scientist.
Some even considered him like a spiritual guru.
Right. And trying to separate fact from fiction when it comes to his life, well, it's tricky. There are so many stories, legends.
It's like he's the Elvis of ancient Greece, a total rock star mathematician. Okay, so speaking of legends, I read somewhere that Pythagoras was believed to have, wait for it, supernatural powers.
Oh, yeah, there are all sorts of wild tales surrounding him. That's part of what makes him so fascinating.
But is there any truth to those stories?
It's hard to say for sure. A lot of it is probably embellishment over the centuries, you know, how stories get passed down.
Oh, definitely. But even without all the mythical stuff, his ideas were pretty groundbreaking for the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just consider this. At the core of his whole philosophy was this idea that numbers are the essence of everything, like everything.
So he wasn't just using numbers for counting sheep or measuring fields. He thought they held the key to understanding, like, the entire universe.
Exactly.
Wow.
Imagine a world where every single number has a deeper meaning, where mathematical ratios could explain not just the physical world, you know, the stuff we can see and touch, but also morality, music, even the soul.
Okay, now you're blowing my mind. I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around that. What would a world like that even look like?
Well, they had some pretty interesting ideas, let me tell you. For example, have you ever heard of metempsychosis?
Not ring a bell.
Basically, it's the idea of reincarnation.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like coming back in another life.
Yeah, but the Pythagoreans took it a step further. They believed that after you die, your soul could be reborn, not just as another human, but as an animal too. And what you came back as depended on the choices you made in your previous life.
Whoa, so like if you weren't a good person, you could come back as a slug or something.
Well, maybe not a slug, but yeah.
So is this where the idea of karma comes from?
Possibly. It's definitely an interesting connection. The Pythagoreans believe that every single action you take has consequences, not just in this life, but in future lives as well. Kind of makes you
Okay.
think, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's like cosmic accountability or something. So, okay, they believe that numbers were the key to understanding everything. Did they have like specific interpretations for each number? Like, what did 7 mean to them?
Oh, they definitely did. For them, each number had a symbolic meaning, like its own personality almost. For example, the number 1 represented unity, you know, like the source of all creation, the beginning of everything. And the number 2, that symbolized duality.
Duality.
Yeah, things like light and dark, masculine and feminine, good and evil. Yeah, the fundamental forces that sort of create the universe through their interaction.
Wow, so like a whole system of meaning built on these numerical relationships. It's amazing how much thought they put into it. Did they have a favorite number?
Actually, yeah. They were especially fascinated by the number 3. They considered it to be a symbol of perfection and completeness.
Makes sense. 3 sides to a triangle, 3 dimensions in space. You know, it pops up everywhere.
And think about things like the concept of a Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. It's a powerful number, 3.
I'm starting to look at numbers differently now. Like, do we still carry any of that reverence for numbers, or have we lost that somewhere along the way?
I don't know. It's a good question to think about. Yeah. We tend to think of numbers in a very practical sense these days, right? Like for measurements, calculations, things like that. But for the Pythagoreans, numbers had a much deeper meaning. It wasn't just about quantity, it was about quality.
Right, right. They had a whole philosophy built around it. It wasn't just about crunching numbers.
Exactly. And they didn't just stop with 1, 2, and 3 either. Like the number 4, for example, that was associated with justice and stability.
Interesting. So their whole worldview was built on this elaborate numerical framework. But how did they apply those ideas to something as vast and mysterious as, well, the cosmos?
Ah, well, that's where things get really mind-blowing. They have this concept called the harmony of the spheres. Imagine this. They believe that as the planets move through space, they created harmonious sounds.
Wait, planets making music?
Like a giant cosmic symphony that we just can't hear.
That's wild. I mean, no wonder Pythagoras and his crew have captured our imaginations for centuries. This is the stuff of legends. But, okay, how did they even come up with that idea? Did they have some sort of scientific basis for it? Or was it, more of a philosophical leap?
Well, Pythagoras himself made a pretty groundbreaking discovery about musical harmony. He was experimenting with this instrument called a lyre, kind of like an ancient harp.
Okay, yeah.
And he found that if you change the length of the strings by specific ratios, you create harmonious intervals, like the relationship between different musical notes.
So a shorter string makes a higher note.
Right. And the ratios between those lengths, they're mathematical. And Pythagoras took this principle and he applied it to the universe.
I think I see where this is going.
He theorized that the distances between the planets and the speeds at which they moved corresponded to these same musical ratios, creating the music of the spheres. But remember, this was long before telescopes or modern astronomy, right? They were trying to understand the universe using just observation, logic, and music.
It's incredible. It's like they believed that the universe was literally singing to them in this mathematical language. But how did they actually measure those distances and speeds? I mean, did they have any real evidence for these ratios, or was it purely philosophical?
Well, not in the way we think of evidence today. It wasn't like they had a cosmic ruler or a speedometer for the planets.
All right, makes sense.
But for them, the idea itself, that mathematical harmony was governing the universe, it was so elegant, so beautiful. It just had to be true,
So it was more like a philosophical concept supported by what they observed in music and math?
Exactly.
Got it. So it wasn't just a bunch of stargazing mathematicians sitting around theorizing. They took these ideas about numerical harmony and all that and actually tried to apply them to their own lives, didn't they?
That's right. The Pythagoreans believed that if they could understand these cosmic harmonies, then they could actually live more fulfilling lives, in tune with the universe.
Interesting.
They saw this idea of perfection, like in those perfect numbers we talked about.
You mean like 6, where all the divisors add up to the number itself?
Yes, exactly. And they thought this perfect number concept extended to the heavens. This music of the spheres, it wasn't just about the sounds. It was about the whole universe operating according to these perfect mathematical ratios.
Wow.
And they believed that by, understanding these ratios and aligning themselves with them, they could live more balanced and harmonious lives.
So they weren't just looking up at the stars. They were trying to, integrate these cosmic principles into their daily routines. So how did they actually do that? Did they have, special practices or rituals or anything like that?
The Pythagorean school, it wasn't just a place to study, it was a whole way of life. They had their own community, a whole code of conduct to follow. They believed in living a virtuous life, practicing moderation and balance in everything.
So no wild toga parties for these guys?
Well, I'm not sure about that. Their idea of a good time probably involved a lot more philosophy than we're used to. Picture them sitting around, discussing math mysteries or playing the lyre under the stars.
Okay, yeah. That does sound kind of peaceful, actually. But they did have some pretty strict rules, right? I read something about them not being allowed to eat beans.
Oh, yeah, that's one of the more famous ones. They believed certain foods, including beans, could disrupt the body's harmony. It's all about maintaining that balance, remember?
Yeah.
They were also big on physical and mental discipline. Lots of meditation and silence.
So lots of self-control. Any other practices they had that we might find a little strange today?
Oh, for sure. The Pythagorean community was very secretive. They had these elaborate initiation rites and periods of silence for new members. And some of their teachings were considered too sacred to be shared with outsiders.
Wow. It's like they were running their own secret society with all their special rituals and knowledge. No wonder there's so many myths and legends about them. But beyond all the mystery, their ideas, they actually had a lasting impact on the world, right? It wasn't just math and music they influenced.
Oh, absolutely. Their emphasis on logic and reason, that really laid the groundwork for what would eventually become the scientific method centuries later.
Wow.
And then their whole philosophical inquiry into the nature of the soul, the afterlife, ideas like that, they deeply influenced thinkers like Plato and Aristotle.
Oh.
So their reach, it went way beyond just math and music.
It's like they weren't just focused on triangles and cosmic tunes. They were really trying to grapple with, the fundamental order of the universe and how we fit into it all.
Yes. Exactly. And what's so fascinating me is that even though some of their specific beliefs might seem strange to us now, those core ideas about harmony, balance, the power of reason, they still resonate with us today.
It's like they were tapping into something essential about the human experience, our desire to find meaning and order in the world.
For sure.
Speaking of order, did they have any thoughts on, you know, how society should be run?
They did, actually. Their vision for an ideal society was one led by, get this, philosopher kings.
Little philosopher.
Yeah. They imagined this world where justice and harmony prevail, guided by those same principles of cosmic order we've been talking about.
So they weren't just interested in personal enlightenment, they were thinking about how to apply these principles on a larger scale to create a better world.
Exactly. They believed that if humanity could just understand and align itself with these universal harmonies, that we could achieve a much higher level of social and political order. But, it's interesting because their vision of this philosopher king society, it never really took hold. In fact, the Pythagorean community itself was eventually persecuted and scattered.
Oh, well, that's a shame. I guess it makes you think about how hard it is to put those big philosophical ideas into practice in the real world. But even so, their vision of a more harmonious society, it seems like it's continued to inspire people throughout history, right? So if we had to sum it all up, what can we really learn from Pythagoras and his followers? What's the takeaway from this deep dive?
That's a good question. I think one of the biggest lessons is that there's always more to discover,
Always more to learn.
Yeah. The Pythagoreans remind us to never stop seeking those underlying patterns and connections that unite seemingly different things. To keep looking beyond the surface, questioning our assumptions about the world.
And to never underestimate the power of a good triangle.
Ha, of course. But seriously, they encourage us to consider the possibility that there might be this deeper, more harmonious order underlying all the chaos we see in the world around us.
I love that. It's like they're inviting us to join them on this quest for knowledge, driven by curiosity and a sense of wonder.
And that's a quest worth taking no matter what time you live in.
Absolutely. So now that we've spent some time in the world of Pythagoras, what really stood out to you the most from all this?
Honestly, I'm still captivated by that whole music of the spheres concept. I just keep picturing it, trying to imagine what that cosmic symphony would sound like.
Yeah, it really captures the imagination, doesn't it?
And the idea that numbers themselves have these symbolic meanings that can reveal deeper truths about ourselves and the universe, that's pretty profound stuff.
It is.
And we've only just scratched the surface here. There's so much more to explore when it comes to Pythagoras and his legacy. For example, his ideas about numerical harmony, they had a huge influence on art and architecture. And we haven't even talked about their theories about the nature of time and space yet.
It's amazing how much ground they covered. Maybe this deep dive will inspire some of our listeners to, dust off those old geometry books and start seeing math in a whole new light.
Or even pick up an instrument and try to hear that music of the spheres for themselves.
Well, there's a challenge I might be up for. But for now, I think it's time to wrap up our journey into the world of Pythagoras.
It's amazing, isn't it? All this stuff we've been talking about, it's like 2,500 years old, but it still feels relevant today.
I know. We started with a right triangle and ended up, well, kind of everywhere. Time travel, cosmic music, philosophy, secret societies.
Pythagoras, what a guy. Most people just know him for that theorem, right?
Right, like, thanks for the geometry help, Pythagoras, but we're good.
But we've seen that he was so much more than that. A true visionary.
Totally. He changed how people thought about the world. Even if some of his specific ideas seem a little, out there by today's standards.
Yeah, like that whole beans thing. No
Yeah.
beans allowed. But still, those core ideas about reason and harmony and how everything's connected, they're still powerful, even now.
It's like he planted these little seeds of thought and they've just kept growing and changing throughout history.
It's true. And you know what I find really interesting? The fact that all the myths and legends around Pythagoras, they actually helped make his ideas stick around. All those stories about his supernatural powers, the secret nature of his school, it made it even more intriguing, right?
So the mystery itself became part of the appeal.
Exactly.
It's like a reminder that there's always an element of wonder, of the unknown, in the pursuit of knowledge.
And that's true for anything you study, really. You get to a point where things get murky, unexplained, the stuff that doesn't quite fit.
Stuff that makes you scratch your head and go, what's going on here?
Exactly. And that's where I think the true spirit of Pythagoras shines through. He's like, hey, embrace the mystery. Keep asking questions.
Keep searching for those deeper connections.
Yes. Don't ever lose that curiosity.
Well said. Well, I think we've explored just about every corner of the Pythagorean universe today.
We've covered a lot of ground. But before we sign off, I want to leave everyone with one final thought. If, as Pythagoras believed, numbers are the language of the universe, what secrets are they whispering to us? What hidden harmonies are out there waiting to be discovered if we just learn to listen?
That's a great question. It's like he's challenging us to go out and experience the world with fresh eyes, right? To see the math and the music and the stars, to see the connections in everything,
To keep exploring
to keep questioning.
and to never stop seeking those hidden harmonies, wherever they might be.
Beautifully put. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Pythagoras. Until next time, keep exploring.